Good day. Welcome to the second part of this presentation about Professor David Ng's Future Ready Education Framework. In this part, we discuss what makes a world-class education system. According to him, a successful education system is able to develop future-ready individuals who will continue to learn beyond graduation, take on future life work, and thrive in a changing society and environment. There are four dimensions to consider in Dr. David Ng's framework. First of all, we look at the context for which whether it is relevant to Singapore or global. These are two threads. The second one is purpose, what we are intending for our learners to develop. The third are the practices that are happening within the school. And the fourth is time. This is about the magnitude and the direction of the value creation efforts by the school and, of course, the learners. Let's examine each of these in detail. But before that, here's a useful picture to think about how they relate to one another. For example, when we are reviewing our practices within our school, do we consider, for example, whether the practices fit both a global context? Do they fit the Singapore context or both? Do they fit the various educational purposes that we have? Secondly, even within the respective spheres, do we look at whether they're integrated? Are the practices in the school integrated? Are the purposes integrated? Are the contexts integrated? Something for us to think about as we review, right, how we are trying to bring our learners to be future ready. Let's start by looking at the first dimension, purpose. There are actually essentially three purposes that underlie why we want to educate. Number one, we want our learners to be developed for learning. Number two, we want them to develop for life work. Number three, we want them to be developed for living. Let's go into a bit of detail. Learning. Learning itself has three areas. One, lifelong, something which is already familiar to us. We wanted to continue learning after school. Two, life-wide. That's about mastery in different domains. Not just in our academic domains, but even in other areas. For example, the physical, the holistic domains, right? Whatever the sum total of all the domains they can probably be exposed to within the school. Right? These are all the different domains that we want our learners to have deep mastery. The third is life deep. The idea of being able to meet the future demands of future jobs which will be value creating and high tech. This means that we want them to have learning that will go beyond, that is useful not just for today, but extending into the future. So we want them to keep on learning for that. The second idea, they learn for what we call life work. This is a development that's different from what we used to call a career. Nowadays, we know the future of work may not be just one career. Okay, you may be working 1 year. Next year, you could go for a sabbatical. In the following year, you could go for a gig work. Fourth, you could stop working and pursue your passion, whatever that passion is. Okay, you could write a book or whatever. But whatever you choose to put all your passion and all your efforts into for the year, that's your life work. The third domain, it's about idea of that when we, even as a learner, we are not a learner singly by ourselves. We are a learner in society, and learners need to be ready for the work of citizenry as well as the social practices. The second dimension is about context. And we mentioned both global and Singapore. Let's look at Singapore, for example. What's the trajectory of our context? How is our context going to be changing? There are three areas that we need to consider. Economic, social, and environment. Underlying, unspoken, of course, to all three is technology. But let's look at economic. Who is Singapore's richest man today? He's the founder of the company that gives us our Shopee. which some of you are going to shop next month. All right, and you realize that it's not a banker, it's not a property magnate, okay, or tycoon. So he was a person who created a value by providing a novel service and by commercializing his innovation, right? He created value for the economy and for himself. So that's the economic, right? Second idea is the social. As the framework was being written, Singapore had just passed the Prevention of Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act. As I'm discussing with you, right, we are talking about passing a law to have racial harmony. And Singapore already has rules for religious harmony. But I see laws can only bring us so far. Most important thing is what kind of society we will really be depends on each and every of the individuals who make up the society. The question is, what kind of individuals do you want your students to be in that kind of society? So that's the social trajectory. The last one is environment. If I told you just recently back that we will be putting solar panels on the top of reservoirs, you might think I'm joking, but the reality is already here. And it's just been announced that they're opening new openings, okay, and new courses for what? Digital Agri-Tech Operations Manager. So the OM of the future will still have to do the OM job, but we need to know digitalization and agro-technology. Stacks of skills and knowledge upon existing jobs is going to define as Singapore looks at how we harness and sustain our environment. What kind of skills, knowledge, and attitudes will be required? Okay, so there's a listing of some of these here. There are many, right, that we need our learners to be ready. The idea is to realize that knowledge in terms of our academic domains are useful. But if we want to help our learners in the trajectory of the context, we need to look beyond at some of these larger level skills, values, and knowledge. The third dimension is practices. Whatever that's happening in the school, community practices, teaching and learning practices, school leadership management and change practices, undergirding all these different types of practices you have are the inquiry methods. That means how you find out about how it's going. What do you intend to do to review them? These are called your inquiry methods, right? And we need to have we need to have many diverse types of inquiry methods, different types of data users, in order to inform how we review and improve our practices. But the most important thing is that whatever you have, right, Prof. David Ng shares, practices cannot remain unchallenged paradigms, ways of doing things. Our practices must evolve and be relevant to match the evolving realities of purposes, time, and context. These are changing. The question then, how are our practices changing? I'll be going a bit deeper into community as well as teaching and learning practices. The school is a community. What are the community practices? Community, there are three components to this. Okay, to have a community, of course, you must have a domain. Okay, people with shared interests. Okay, teachers, a domain of teachers. A domain of a school. Maybe students can be a domain. Okay, in the CCA, right? So they come together for common interests, a common expertise. But every community has community building practices. Meaning to say, they have relationship building. Okay, they have practices that help to sustain a community. And every community have very unique practices that distinguish them. This could be the shared resources that all the members have. They are able to tap on the same experiences, the same stories. They have problem-solving approaches. They have lenses of looking at issues. Right? So, what are some practices that you see in the community, and are they evolving, okay, as the context changes? The bread and butter, teaching and learning. Singapore has been doing very well in its T&L, and we see from the PISA results, they say that we are very, very good at outcomes-based education. We know the outcome that we want, right? We have specific instructional objectives. We bring in the best possible pedagogies, coupled with the best curriculum, okay, and supported by assessment to help us to bring our learners to the goal and across the finish line. We are good at that. But as Prof. David Ng shares, if we are only requiring our students to learn from what we know and defined by us, then there will be less opportunities for them to learn new knowledge. And more importantly, less opportunities to create new knowledge. Well, so what must we do? Yes, our instructional objectives must still be there, but we also need alternative inquiry methods, practices of learning. I'd like to talk about some of these. Constructivism, something that's not new to all of us. Right? When we tag on active learning, there's a lot of this when we pivoted to SLS. All right, and when we tag on cooperative learning, when we give our learners a voice to discuss, and then we are interested to find out how they are learning, whether they are learning. Constructivism. Social constructivism. This is where we realize we live in a world where the knowledge is constantly evolving. The knowledge does not lie only in the teacher, but it lies in the community, the class community. Think about, for instance, COVID-19, vaccination. Where did you learn your knowledge about these things? Did you attend a course about COVID-19? You certainly did not. Alright, so but it's through leveraging on your peers, okay, discussing, reading information, sharing the information, that's where we actually build a community of knowledge, common understandings about things that matter important. And there are many things that our learners have within their world that we never grew up with. Right? And they will be actually in the best position to build that knowledge. So social constructivism, when the teacher is alongside learning through the learner, and actually allowing our learners to tap through their networks. And with social media, the networks can be much bigger. Which brings us to connectivism. The idea that there are nodes of important information out there, and the important skill that we need is for our learners to be able to access those nodes. I have an example, for example, in my own LEP course, we are studying about the country of Estonia, so we did the usual writing to the people, and asking for information. We got many polite refusals. Finally, a breakthrough came. I remembered when I found out through social media, interestingly, that my ex-colleague's daughter is working in Estonia. So we linked up with her through my ex-colleague. Right, she shared with us everything on Estonia. She was working in an Estonian startup, a unicorn worth more than $1 billion. She connected us with a global head of people, alright, and we had a good session. And through her, okay, we were connected to other people, even the Estonia enterprise in Singapore. And through that contact, we also will open doors to others. And we learned a lot richer learning about Estonia through that contact. That's connectivism, learning from networks and connections. Alright? The fourth dimension is time. When we have time, we are studying the past, right, meeting the present standards of knowledge, and being prepared for future. These are the school's efforts in these areas. Alright, and what we choose to spend on show us what is the purpose of education. But time has three dimensions: the past, the present, and future. It turns out that many schools' activities focus on the present. Okay, we want to help our learners. We want to make sure the school runs operationally effectively. We bring in marketing efforts, open house, so that more students can come in, right? But whether our efforts help to prepare the learners for the future, because the future is also important. The magnitude is a representation of the school's efforts, and it shows what the things about what the school is important. Is important. And you see the black line over here, what it shows as being important, okay, the total sum of the past, the present, and future. Schools have limited time and efforts. The question is that with your limited time, what do you choose to spend on? Things that are mostly focused on present, or helping our learners to assess the future. So there you have it, the entire Future Ready Learners framework. Right, the four dimensions that you see, putting it together. I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you.